Hey, you guys, and welcome to this week's edition of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought. This week, we're digging in deep to some messes that are in your pantry or in your kitchen. We're going to be talking about decluttering for those of us who are busy, have a lot of real life going on, maybe those of us who aren't great at keeping the clutter down. So today we're going to be joined by author Dana K. White, and we're going to be talking down and dirty about decluttering our pantries. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This is one of those things that I feel like for homesteaders, we're always struggling with. Homesteading, a homesteading life is not a minimalist life. We need tools, we need equipment, and usually we're stocking up some form of food, whether that's through bulk buying or preservation or something. And so there ends up actually being a lot of stuff with homesteading. So how do you keep your stuff but not have your stuff keep you? How do you keep your stuff from getting so out of control that you end up managing stuff instead of getting to participate in the parts of homesteading that you love and the doing things and getting to enjoy time with your family and friends? So we're going to be digging into that. But first, let's say thank you to today's sponsor, which is American Blossom Linens. Now, you've heard us talk about American Blossom Linens before, because these guys make the coziest, highest quality linens right here in the United States from 100% organic cotton wool. Now, when I first tried out their sheets, it was surprisingly like kind of a warm hug, I guess is what I would call it. The sheets just feel so durable, but they feel soft at the same time. And the amazing thing is that as I'm washing them, the more I use them, and I'm a couple years into some of the sets of sheets, the more I use them, they don't get thinner. They don't lose their quality. They don't feel like they're going threadbare. What they feel like they're doing is just getting softer. You guys, I think I might be passing these sheets down to my children. That's the kind of quality that they are. They're like heirloom quality, like we haven't seen in a long time. So make sure that you check out American Blossom Linens. It's one of those things that, once you buy them, you're not going to go back because they just are such incredibly good quality. So head on over to their website and use the code Homesteading Family, that's all one word, to get 20% off and free shipping. Again, that's the coupon code Homesteading Family. Oh, and don't forget, you guys, they make pillows that are wool filled. Yay! Talk about toxin free. And they make other things like blankets, throws, but they make crib sheets. Yay for toxin free baby bedding. That is important to me. And that is exactly what our child Nathaniel is sleeping on, our 2-year-old right now, is he is on those sheets. All right. Thank you, American Blossom Linens. Now, jumping right into our interview today with Dana K. White. You might have heard of her already. If you don't know her by name, you might know her by the name A Slob Comes Clean, because that is the name of her blog and her website. Dana is a decluttering pro. She's a best-selling author, and she's a podcast host who's been transforming homes and mindsets with her cleaning and organizing strategies for over a decade. And I love it that she does it from an experience base, not an expert where, she learned a lot of stuff, but she had to go through the hard process of decluttering her life and finding that a lot of the expert advice was not working for her. So today she's going to be helping us tackle our cluttered pantries and helping us to get around some of the hangups that we might have on cleaning out spaces with things like food in them. Messes are an inevitable part of life. And there's this thing that happens with homesteading, which is that uh, it maybe in our hearts we'd like to be kind of minimalists, but the reality is homesteading does require stuff. It requires canning lids and, fermentation weights and all these different things. And so it can become really, really necessary to look at how we're storing these things to make sure we're not driving ourselves crazy. So, Dana, your no mess decluttering process is like a lifeline for busy homesteaders and busy moms. How can homesteaders use your method in the pantry and the kitchen? Then we'll like really get into what that looks like and how to actually use it. But like in a big sense, how can this help people with their life?
Yeah. So I I apply the process to any and every situation. Like it's the way that I get started when I'm overwhelmed, and it's the way that I keep on moving when I'm still overwhelmed, right? Um, but I think the key, especially what I think about when I think about homesteading, and when you're talking about all of the um, pieces and parts that are absolutely necessary for what it is that's important to you, it all comes down to function, right? Like it all comes down to function. And the key is to give priority space to the functions that you need to be able to do in here, right? And so, yes, we're talking about the pantry, but we're also talking about letting that pantry serve its purpose and not have those things spill out into the space that you need to actually be able to do the things that you need to do, the canning and the preparation, because all of that takes space, right? My story is that I was completely overwhelmed with stuff, and so I help people who are completely overwhelmed with stuff, right? And I would gather all these things that were very useful things. They weren't just like little pretty knickknacks, right? Like I was bringing all these useful things in, but I brought in so many that I had so much stuff that I didn't have the space to actually be able to do the things that I wanted to do when I brought all that stuff in, right? So really keeping that function in the forefront is key.
I think this is so key for some of us, especially as homesteaders. We're so like clued into value, right? Like this could be valuable. This could be useful to me someday. And if I have it now, I don't want to get rid of it and then have to buy it again. But the reality is that you can like stock yourself up on things that you're not actually using. And yeah, like work yourself out of the workspace or even the storage space for the things you really do need.
Or even the bandwidth. And I
Yeah.
think that's what it really I had to learn to accept, was
Mm.
that I had so much stuff for all these future possibilities of things I wanted to do someday, that I was so overwhelmed because of the mess that was created by that, that then I was not able to do any of that stuff. Right.
Right.
Like all of it. And so then it became these things that I didn't feel like I could get rid of also were like failure facing me in the face, like because it was reminding me of all the things I thought I was going to do. So I just want to be clear. My decluttering process has no arbitrary getting rid of things, as far as like, oh, nobody should have this. And I know that can be a real issue for those of us who tend to be super frugal and see the usefulness in things that other people don't think are useful. Somebody else might say, why don't you just buy it at the store? And you're like, well, you don't get it, so I'm not listening to you, right? And so it's like whatever it is that's important to you deserves space in your home, but you also have to acknowledge the realities of that space so that it can stay under control and you can actually do the things that are important to you, right? Like, so you can keep anything, but you can't keep everything.
Mm. Yeah, I really love that. And I think that you bring up such a really good point about like the mental space too, right? Like you can have so much stuff that what you end up doing is you're taking care of the stuff that you have instead of actually getting to do the things in life that you're wanting to do. But there becomes this like level of ambient noise when you have all this stuff and it doesn't have its spot, it doesn't have its place. There's not like the organization to it because you're always having to deal with this like mental chatter of all the stuff that's yeah, sending you messages, maybe making you feel like a failure, maybe just like that eventual to-do list is so long in your head, like, oh yeah, I have to get to cleaning out the cabinet again, I have to do this, I have to do that, that it actually steals your ability to focus on what you do want to do in the moment.
It really, really does. And even the physical part of it, right? Even if you're using what should be workspace, countertops, tables as storage for all the stuff you don't have a place for, you don't have room for, then you take, okay, so I'm going to harvest my cucumbers and I'm going to make pickles, right? I need space to do the chopping and all the things, right? But if I am dreading the fact that before I can even do that, I have to clear the table. I have to
Yes.
clear the workspace before I can do that. Before I can even do that, I have to wash all of the dishes. I have to, I have not been able to put them, I didn't have anywhere to put my things. And so I stored them out in the garage and it's time. And not only do I have to clear the table, but I also have to go back and rewash the things that maybe I wouldn't have had to rewash, in addition to the things that need to be fresh. So, all that, it just adds so many tasks when you have to I have to clear the space in order to be able to do the thing.
I found that so true in my own life. Like if I leave the kitchen a mess, my desire to get back in there and cook a meal, it is so much harder to make myself do it because step number one has to be like deal with yesterday's mess. And, I didn't want to do it yesterday. I really don't want to do it today. And so it just adds this huge mental block to just getting in there and doing it. And yeah, it's amazing how much we can put off our problems today and we actually end up like stealing from ourselves tomorrow in a lot of ways because we just don't know what to do with it. We don't want to deal with it. Whatever it is. So we just create a pile somewhere like, I'll deal with this tomorrow. I'll deal with this tomorrow. And tomorrow comes around and we don't feel any more like dealing with it than we did today.
Or don't know what to do, because so I have this concept. I call it the container concept, right? And it's one of those things that if I had not been writing about figuring out my house, I was not teaching anything when I started writing about this, right? I was just trying to journal, getting my own house under control. If I wasn't writing about it, I would never teach this concept because it seems so incredibly obvious when I say it that I'm like, how did I not know that? I would have been embarrassed to share it with other people, except that I was writing in real time what I was figuring out. And people said, what? I didn't get this either. And so I call it the container concept. What that means is I used to think that containers were for putting things in. And so I would fill one up and I would still have more stuff left over. And so I'd buy another container and then I'd buy another container and then the containers wouldn't fit on the shelf. And so I would buy another shelf and then the room wouldn't fit any more shelves. And I would think, well, I'm doomed. There's no way for me to get organized. Why is this so hard for me when it's easy for everybody else? Like that was my thought process, right? And so when I was working one day and I was talking to myself and I was saying the word container and I went, wait a minute. The root of container, like within the word container is the word contain, like serve as a limit, serve as a boundary. The same way that firefighters work to contain a fire. They create a boundary. As long as they can keep the fire inside the boundary, they can keep it under control. But if it goes outside the boundary, that's when the bad things happen. And so that hit me that a container is not for putting things in. A container is meant to serve as a boundary. This is something many people are like, how, you didn't know that? Like, what? Wait, isn't that obvious? It is not obvious to many of us, especially those of us with creative brains who do things like canning and gardening and all that kind of stuff, right? And so we don't see limits. It's a wonderful quality that we, that we have. I saw that, okay, the container is a limit, then it freed me up from making value decisions about each and every item. I didn't have to go, is this a good gadget? Is this a good thing? Because in my mind, as someone who sees the value in things that other people don't see value in, I'm like, well, of course it is. Could I use it? Of course I can. I will find a way someday. Do I need it? Well, of course I need it because I've got it now. And if I get rid of it, then I have to buy another one. And that's wasting money and all these things so I don't use those questions in my decluttering. Instead, is there space for it? If there's space for it, it can stay. And when I look at it that way, then I say, this is the cabinet that I have for my canning supplies. Okay. It doesn't grow because I wish I could keep more canning supplies. That's just not how the universe works. It's like it's finite. And that means that I put my favorite or my most important, most essential things in there first. And the size of the cabinet decides how much of that stuff I can have. I can wish that I could have more, but the reality is the space is the size that it is. And if I try to keep more stuff than I have space, there is no hope of it ever staying under control. And that's where I make some decisions. I go, okay, well, I really legitimately need more canning supplies than I have space in this cabinet. So I have to make a decision and say, okay, well, then this other thing that I really, really enjoy, or I really thought I would enjoy, and so I gathered all the stuff for it, right? It doesn't deserve space as much as the canning supplies, right? Like, so maybe I wanted to do watercolors, right? And so I gathered every supply that I could find at a garage sale and brought it into my house, and it's filling up this cabinet. And I make this decision. I go, you know what? The canning supplies are so important to me. And what is less important to me than the canning supplies? The watercolor stuff. I wanted to do that. I did it once. I wasn't as good at it as I thought I was going to be. And I have this, oh, okay, I can let that go so that I can keep more canning supplies. But I can't keep all of it. I make those decisions according to what is the most container worthy, what's the most space worthy.
So I missed that lesson too. So I'm glad you're talking about it. So thank you. Sometimes it's these simple things that I think maybe got passed on generation to generation. And then we've had some broken generations where, we haven't had the passing on that we used to have. And so a lot of us are relearning some of these basic things. But one of the things that I run into all the time as we're talking about pantries is we all end up with this food in our pantry that for some reason we thought we were going to eat that thing. Maybe we ended up not knowing how to use it, or maybe we had a few of them and we found out in the first, jar or two that like, ooh, we don't actually like this food. My family doesn't like it. And so you end up with these foods back there. I think our budget mindedness, our like value mindedness says, well, you can't throw that away.
What if we use up everything else and that's all we have left, right?
Exactly. When the apocalypse hits, we can go back to eating the red beans that we don't like or whatever it is, So apply your container method for us. Like help us walk through that when we have a pantry of things, maybe even something we've canned ourselves. I am 100% here. Like I have done this before where I canned a whole canner loads without even trying the stuff. We crack it open. We're like, this is awful. Like who thought this was a good recipe? And nobody wants to eat it. But talking ourselves through getting rid of it, help us with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do want to start with saying that I have a 5-step process.
Good.
And what I'm going to talk about is the 5th step. Okay. The reason I want to point that out is that the 5-step process gets you to the point where you're ready to deal with what we're talking about. Okay. Because you've gotten rid of, you start and you look for trash. Is there anything in here that, oh, that jar right there actually didn't seal correctly and it's, like whatever it is. I'm saying that like I know, but anyway, you're the canning expert, not me. But like whatever it is, is there anything here that's obvious? Is there anything here that actually belongs somewhere else and I already know where it goes? I'm going to get that out. Is there anything that is an obvious donation that I don't have all these feelings about, right? And so I'm going to get that out, because what that does is it clarifies what I'm actually dealing with. And it goes ahead and lets me make progress. And when a space is packed full and I look at it, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be so hard. But if I do those non-emotional trash, easy stuff, obvious donations, and get those out first, then it's a little less overwhelming and I'm already seeing some progress and I'm ready to get to the point where we're going to talk about. Okay. So you have these things and it's all about function. We've already established that, right? And so what I need to be able to do is use this cabinet well and easily, whatever that means for me. My mother is the type who can have things put into a space very complicated in a complicated way that fits all kinds of things with, things, and you pull out and you move 6 things to get to the other thing. I personally inherited her belief that I needed to have everything I could ever need for any situation that could ever happen in the future. But I did not inherit her ability to do complicated systems like that, right? I call that my clutter threshold. I can't have as much stuff and it stay under control. So you have to acknowledge that and you go, is this space actually functioning for me now, right? And therefore, and that's the thing, is I am asking these questions instead of having the internal debate with myself over, but we hate it. But what if we needed it? But it's disgusting. But I spent a lot of time on that. But it's no one's going to eat it. But if we were actually grateful for what we, like all these things, like, what, well, my mother would always tell my kids, your taste buds change every 7 years and you should retry foods that, I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, you're always like, we know 7 years, we should try it again. Don't wait 7 years. That's not what I'm saying. But that's not the advice to take away. But so we're not going to have those conversations because they're not helpful, right? They just cause you to spin out. So instead we say, this space is too full. I need the space for the things that we know we are going to eat, right? I know I need the jars back for things, to do this year's harvest. And there's stuff, so I'm thinking along the lines of what is the function of this space? And I say, I'm going to remove my least favorites until I get to the point where this space functions the way that I need it to function. Okay. And there's something about thinking of it as, it's not me who's making decisions about what's good and what's bad. It's the container making a decision for me about how much we can have. And when I look at it that way, then I'm able to say, I'm not rejecting the red beans. Because I know that, some people are like, what? You feel like, and yes, I'm not having to admit that I made a mistake. I'm not having to admit that I wasted time. I'm not having to admit that I didn't introduce my kids to red beans soon enough and now they won't eat them or whatever. I'm not doing this. Instead, I'm just saying these are good. But the reality is the space that I have is the space that I have. And so the stuff we're going to eat is the stuff that actually deserves space here. And the things that we are not going to eat unless we absolutely had nothing else, then that's what needs to go in order to free up the space for the new things that I'm putting in there, right? And so it just takes away that personal rejection or admitting a failure or whatever, and just saying, the space, I would keep it. If I could keep it, I would keep it. But the reality is, I don't have the space. And so I'm going to blame the space, and then I'm ready to let go of it. Does that make sense?
Oh, completely. I think your next book should be titled something like How to Organize an Area Without Needing 5 Years of Therapy First. Like to deal with all of our own issues wrapped up in the stuff, because that's honestly, it's what a lot of it is like we have some inability to let go of it, or we have some of these pressures that come on us like, but I can't waste food. I don't know about you, but you didn't leave a bite of food on your plate growing up because they were starving kids in Africa. And so, some of these messages, whether they make sense or not, have been hammered into us so much that it's like we have a hard time letting go of that. And I love this process because it kind of shortcuts that whole thing and just says, let's just not even go there, and let's go a direction that's actually helpful.
Right. Let's deal with the facts. You can feel the feelings, right? Like you can absolutely feel the feelings of, I wish I wouldn't have done this, whatever. It does hurt to declutter, but I'm not using those feelings as my way to declutter. I'm using the facts. I'm using the facts about the space. I'm using, the just the reality based, that's why I call myself, reality based decluttering, is I can feel those things, but they are not going to dictate that. And what I find is because the assumption is that I'm going to have to use my feelings to declutter, that's a lot of the reason why we put off decluttering, is because I'm like, I don't want to declutter because decluttering is going to require therapy, right? Before I can do this. Or decluttering is going to mean, feeling the things or admitting failure or whatever. And instead it's like, well, what can I do before I ever get to that point? Because that's the beauty. The first 3 steps that we talked about at the beginning of that little section, the trash, the easy stuff that I already know what to do with it, and the obvious donations, all 3 of those are emotion free, right? Like if I am going, oh, my mom would say that's trash, but I don't think it's trash, then that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about obvious, decision-free, emotion-free trash. And so even if I'm like, I'm not even ready to make the red beans decision, I can still make a lot of progress just doing the trash, the easy stuff, and the obvious donations. And then doing that often gives me it doesn't often, it gives me a different perspective on this space, because I then live with my space and I go, wow, it's easier to cook dinner when I don't have to move all these things around because there's just less stuff in here. Would it be even easier if I had even less stuff? Okay, and then my thoughts on the red beans change, right? Because I'm like, okay, ease of use, red beans, ease of use. Okay, when I look at it as a container, I'm now ready to let go of those because of the progress I made without feeling any of those feelings.
Yeah, I love that. So you've kind of like walked us slightly through some of it, but let's just be really concrete. Let's say right now we're kind of headed into the heart of harvest season. So a lot of people are like already dealing with last year's disaster in their pantry. And I know for us inside my membership, I'm always encouraging people at the beginning of harvest season, we're going to take a couple of weeks, we're going to clean out the pantry, we're going to get it, tidy, we're going to deal with all these odds and ends that we realize we're really just not going to use, and we're going to get it all like stocked up with the basics that we need. But if you haven't done that, and as much as I teach it, there are years where I have not done it because life takes over and I just don't get to it. And so somebody's coming in right now and they're starting to restock their pantry, but they're going, oh my goodness, this is a mess. Walk us through like the actual steps that you would take when you did that, starting with that first step you mentioned with the trash.
Yeah. So you look at the space and you just ask yourself, what is trash? Is there any trash? I'm going to look for trash. I know that there are people right now saying, I don't have any trash in my pantry. And maybe you're right. You're probably not right, but maybe you're right. Maybe you are the one who doesn't. Just kidding. But even if you don't have trash, you still look for trash, because yes, you're going to find it. But also, when you open up your pantry and you were feeling all the excitement about this year's harvest and what all you're going to do, and then you look in your pantry and you go, oh, right? Like you just have this draining feeling. It feels like every single thing in there is going to be that feeling, right? But looking for trash makes you look at individual items, right? So only the things that you can see and access without pulling everything out, because that's my no mess process. We do not pull everything out of the space. That's the temptation, right? Like, I'm going to pull everything out. I'm going to make all these piles. But that's the disaster that happens when life happens and kids start bleeding and you have to go deal with something else, or you just lose your energy or your interest in this project. And now everything's spread out all over the kitchen and then you shove it all back in. It just is a disaster. So we don't do that, right? We just go, what trash can I see and get out of here without pulling everything out? Okay. And then my brain is starting to adjust to what's actually in there. Because before, I've kind of been avoiding looking in my pantry when I would get something out, because I knew there were going to be some things that would make me feel all these feelings. And so I'm just looking for trash. I'm adjusting to what it is that I'm seeing. And I'm making immediate progress, because trash is going straight into the trash or recycling bin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's immediately done. There's nothing else to do. I've just done that. And then I'm going to look for easy stuff. Okay, now that I've gotten the trash I could see and access without pulling things out, is there anything that I do already know what to do with it? Sometimes this is the matter of, oh, this thing is down here on this shelf and it goes up on the top shelf. Or sometimes it's, oh, this thing got stuck in here and it goes over here. Maybe, your kid put their mitten in there, for who knows what reason, right? But you go ahead and you deal with those things, meaning put them in their actual home. Like, go ahead and take them all the way to their home. And then the third step is obvious donations. This is where, in a pantry especially, you're going to make quick progress. And I do want to go back, since we're talking about a pantry, expired things are number one on the trash, right? Like, that's where you can make the most progress quickly. It's just say, I need to work in this space. I am going to make this expiration date my decision. If you've got all the feelings about the expiration dates and all that, I'm sure y'all talk about that a lot in your community, of how long things last. But like, this is the decision that I'm making in this moment. This is the line, and I'm going to get stuff out. So then the donations would be, okay, what is it that I don't feel all the feelings about donating to someone else, right? Mm-hmm. This is not the things that I'm just going, I guess I should donate it. No, it's like anything in here that doesn't bring up any feelings that I could immediately stick into a donate box and know that it can be given away, right? That makes that progress. And then my 2 decluttering questions are, the first one is, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? And this achieves organization, right? We're just decluttering, but at this point, the only things left in here are things that either I don't know where they go or they go here, right? And so I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to say, for every item, if I needed this, give me an example of something that would be in the pantry.
Extra canning lids.
Okay, if I needed this extra canning lid, where would I look for it first? And this is something that very easily could randomly end up in a pantry shelf, right? If I needed this extra canning lid, where would I look for it first? Okay. The thing is, if you already knew where your extra canning lids went, they left during the easy stuff step.
There you go.
Point. Yep. We are literally talking about stuff that I don't know where it goes, because that's our biggest frustration when we get to decluttering. We're like, I get down to all these little things and I don't know what to do with them. And okay, if I needed this extra canning lid, I'm going to picture myself looking for it with no confidence that it's going to be where I look. But if I thought I was going to tear my kitchen apart and search for this canning lid, because I just know I have it, what's the first shelf I would put it on, look on, or the first drawer that I would open, or the first cabinet I would open? Like, where is the first place where I would look at the beginning of what I assume is going to be a 3-hour search? And then I'm going to take it there right now. And this is the key to the no mess process, is not to make piles of things to do later, but to go ahead and take it there now, so that I know that at any time I can stop and I've made this space better. Knowing I can stop at any time is generally the thing that allows me to get started, because I'm not making this huge day-long commitment to my pantry. I'm just like, you know what I can do, as what I can do in the time that I have, and I'll do it in a way where I can stop at any time. So I take that there.
That's amazing. Because
Yes.
then you're like, I have 5 minutes. I have 10 minutes. Like you can absolutely step in and start. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely transformational to do it that way, because that was the reason I would always put off decluttering. I thought I had to pull everything out because that's what the expert said to do, right?
Right.
I just need to become the expert myself so I could say it differently, but like I thought you had to pull everything out. And so I was like, okay, well, last time I pulled everything out. I worked on it for 3 hours. I shut down, or life happened, and then everything was out for the next 3 months, and our life was complete chaos, and I can't have that happen again. So if last time I spent 3 hours, probably need to set aside 6 hours this time.
Right.
Well, who has 6 hours, or then I think, you know what, actually, okay, I said 6 hours 3 weeks ago. Now it's worse. I probably need a whole weekend. You know
Yeah.
what? I'm going to wait until Christmas, when we're home for a week. You know what? Actually, I'm just going to wait until I'm retired. I mean, like that's that's the thing, is you just keep kicking it down the road because you're like, it didn't work before, and so I must need more time. When am I going to? So changing it to, I'm just going to focus on making this space better, having less, doing one item at a time, final decision, act on that final decision. I can work in any amount of time. Working in any amount of time means I finally made the progress. As long as I was like going to do it right and all the way from start to finish, I never started.
Yeah.
But when I did things in a way, when I started doing things in a way where I could stop at any time, that's how I actually changed my home the way I had always wanted to. It's a weird, thing. Um,
But it's so important, and I think it's so important to understand those little mental things that are holding us back. Because even out in the garden, this is kind of what I teach: is that if you have this idea that you need to go out and you have to weed the whole garden, who is ever going to be able to have enough time for that? But if your goal is that I have 5 minutes every day, I start on one end of my garden and I get as far as I can. And then the next day I come back out for the next 5 minutes and I start where I stopped yesterday. And by doing that, you just slowly work through the whole thing, and you have much better success than if you were just trying to do it all in one moment. And so this is great. The other thing that I think is just gold is this question about where would I look for it first? The amount of things that I still don't know where they are because I put them in a safe location.
Very good place. Yeah.
A very good place. And I'm like, how many very good places could there be in this house? And yet I still haven't found some of these items. Who knows what I did with it?
It's so transformational. Like, how many times have people said, half joking, half crying, well, I got organized and now I can't find anything.
Yes, yes.
Opposite of being organized, right? And so for me, this was a huge moment for me, because I was like, listen, as I was talking to myself, because that's what I do, and I was writing about it on the blog, I was like, it's never worked. Like, all these great places to put things, it's never worked. I get so frustrated. I just end up moving all these things around and then finding it 5 years later when I'm dealing with that space. And I just finally went, you know what? Where would our family, look for it first? Because I was talking about fingernail clippers when I came up with this, thing. Is I was like, everybody knows fingernail clippers should go in the bathroom drawer. I mean, come on, right? I mean, that's where my grandma kept hers. And so that's the right place to put it. And I went, you know what? The reality is, we look for our fingernail clippers. Anytime somebody needs, hey, mom, where's the fingernail clippers? They go straight to the junk drawer in our kitchen.
There you go.
And would somebody tell me that's the wrong place? Yes, because I've been on the internet long enough to know that somebody will always tell you what's wrong, right? But the reality is, if we put it in the place where we would look for it first, it is in the first place where we look for it. And like, that's the goal of being organized, right?
I love that. It's funny how much we need this like sense of permission from somebody to do what works for us and not what we're supposed to do, or we feel like we're supposed to do. And even me, I consider myself in a lot of places like I don't necessarily follow all the rules. We kind of, Josh and I both write our own rules a little bit, And even that though, I have all these things in my head, all the programming and training in my head that says, yes, I know exactly where those fingernail clippers should go, but that doesn't mean that's where we look for it either. So I
Right.
love that.
Yeah.
Good.
So yeah, it really is transformational. It takes some time to trust yourself to do that if you haven't successfully been organized before, but it also is the way to establish a home for
Yeah.
things, because that's a lot of the struggle in decluttering is like, but I just don't know where things should go. Like, we'll take out should and just say, where would you look for it first? And that's the answer to where it needs to live in your house. Um, so with that question, if I can't answer the question, where would I look for it first? Let's say it's something obscure, that you read about on the internet was the very best way to seal or something. I don't know, I'm making these things up because I'm not the expert. You are.
The random paraffin wax that you got for some strange project in the kitchen that you maybe are
Yes.
going to use again someday. Right.
Right. And so you pick it up and you go, okay, if I needed this paraffin wax, this particular, and sometimes you have to say it out, right? Like maybe you have other kinds that you use all the time, but this is the one that, okay, if I needed this paraffin wax that's only for specific situations or whatever, where would I look for it first? And your answer is, then you ask the second question. And the second question is, if I needed this specific random paraffin wax, would it ever occur to me that I already had some?
Mm.
Because I didn't have a place where I would go looking for it. Okay. So I'm not saying, do you remember you have it? Because I'm a forgetful person, right? And so I'm allow myself to ask the question, if I needed it, where would I look for it first? And I go, but then I have to get real with myself if I say I would never go, if I realize I would never go looking for it. Because the truth is, if I would never go looking for it, it would just sit and I would go buy another one, which is extra wasteful, right? To already have it in my home, but have so much clutter that I don't even know where things are or remember what I have. And then I end up rebuying things that I already have. Like, that's the opposite of what I'm trying to do here. And so I had to say, I'm going to let it go if I would never even think to look for it.
So if you're not going to look for it anyways, you're going to go buy a new one anyways. Why store some that you're never going to look for?
Or I would do without, which is
Yeah.
a completely valid thing to do as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So, yeah, and it's tough because I mean, I might be rebuying something and it might be $7, but I was like, you know what? The time between now and this hypothetical point when I might need to replace this item, which rarely ever actually happens, I'm paying $7 for this space to be usable and functional and decluttered between now and this hypothetical point when I might need to rebuy it. Right? Like, that's how I talk myself through letting go of this item that I might have to rebuy. But in reality, I usually don't. But it's not helpful to me to be like, you won't need to rebuy it, because I'm like, well, you don't know me. I'm like, no, I can use things. I'll use things. But I just decided I'm going to put that value on the space instead of on the stuff. And then over time, it gets easier and easier. But and then the final one is the container concept. And that's the reality of embracing the space that you have. Make it fit, not by shoving it in, but by making it functional for you and how you actually operate. And the first part of that is consolidating, which is really helpful in a pantry, because in a pantry, you're going to put your like items together, which means without pulling everything out, you're going to put your canning lids together and your paraffin wax together, and you're going to put your red beans together, and you're going to put your green beans together, and you're going to do all that, and you're moving things around. What that does is it makes you touch every single item, even though before you were like, oh, it goes here, it goes here, it goes here, right? But when I'm consolidating it, I'm touching things. When I touch something, when I touch a can of red beans, where before it was like, red beans, useful, I now touch it and I go, actually, we did not like these. And now I'm ready to let it go, right? Because I've already got some of that momentum. Other thing it does is it gives me a reality check on, oh, I thought we really liked, you're making me come up with all these vegetable examples. But anyway, that's one I wanted to say. I just love that word. I thought we loved and would use so much hominy. And now that I'm putting them together, I realize I've got 23 jars of hominy and did not register before because they were kind of, there were a few here and a few here, a few here. But when I put them all together, I realized that, and I realized, oh, actually, I need to donate, 12 or 15 or whatever of these jars. And so that process of consolidating turns a lot of things into obvious donations just because of the nature of it. And then the last one to say, if it is still not functional after I've gotten out all of these easy things, that's when I have to go, okay, I'm going to remove my least favorites until it is functional, until
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to access, easy to use. And something about calling it my least favorite. My husband and I were doing a video, um, it's been over a year ago now, but he loves coffee mugs. And we have a coffee mug shelf, which some people are like, why do you need a coffee mug shelf? I'm like, because we love coffee mugs, right? And we have a shelf that we can give to it. So if you have the space, you can keep it. And but he'd gotten a new coffee mug when we were on vacation. And so it was time to get rid of one in order to make the space for the new one. And we were talking. I said, well, just choose your least favorite. And he said, thank you so much for saying least favorite. He's like, because I still get to call it a favorite. Like I'm still getting to put the value on it and say, I love mugs. I love this thing. But the reality is there's only this much space. And so the least favorite has to go. But that doesn't mean I don't love it. Right. And so it somehow keeps me from feeling like I'm rejecting or, giving up or whatever. Instead, I'm like, you know what? I love this mug, but there's no space.
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing in a very short
Very,
nutshell.
very condensed version. That is amazing. And I can see how that would be super, super helpful. One more, I know we've got to wrap up here, but one more question before we go is, I know you've called decluttering therapeutic, and I tend to really, really agree with you here. I think most moms feel this way. What's the most rewarding change that you've seen in your family's daily life from a tidy pantry, tidy kitchen, just kind of living with these tools?
Well, we kind of touched on it earlier. It's the way that it removes so much stress from the daily tasks that have to be done, right? Like the things of, well, just for example, dishes. I used to get so behind on dishes. And so I would buy more dishes because I always felt like I didn't have enough because I was always running out. But then I had so many that then they would pile up even more and they'd be even more overwhelming. And so then I would buy more. But when I really decluttered, we now have like a stack of plates this high and that's it, right? And having fewer plates means that the dishes can't get out of control anymore. And when the dishes can't get out of control anymore, it's just easier to do all the things. Like it's almost counterintuitive, right? Like having fewer dishes means I have to do the dishes more often, but doing the dishes more often makes me less overwhelmed at doing the dishes because I'm doing fewer dishes. And so, and all of that then contributes to it being easier to cook dinner, it being easier to eat it. My college kids are home right now, and I've just been like, okay, you cook dinner tonight, you cook dinner tomorrow night, you could, and so I'm not having to do that. And the fact that our kitchen is just easier to work in means that it's so much easier to for when they were learning how to cook, and also now to just be able to function in there and do the things that they need to do.
Yeah, just daily life gets a little bit smoother, gets a little bit easier, a little fewer stress points, huh?
Exactly.
Tell us about your books that you have out and where people can find you if they want to hear more.
Yeah. So I always tell people to search Dana K. White because Dana
Because you're
White.
not a UFC fighter, right?
Thank you. Yeah, not everybody. It's strange to me how many people don't know that because so many people do know that, but that's not me. So always
Hey,
put the
you're
K.
just a different kind of UFC fighter. Like we should come up with what that is. Like,
I'm just
you
knocking
know,
the clutter out, I guess, right?
fighting clutter. Exactly. I like it.
Yeah. So if you put Dana K. White wherever, you'll find me. My website that I started back in 2009, just chronicling my own attempts to get my house under control, is called aslobcomesclean.com. So you can find that. Um, and that has links to all my books, and they're available wherever books are sold. Most libraries carry them as well. So the most well known is Decluttering at the Speed of Life. And that has my all the mindset shifts around your space and your stuff, as well as the 5-step process applied to all the different areas of your home and situations that you might face.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise here. I think this is going to help so many people. And you guys, I would really recommend to go check out Dana's books. I know I've found a lot of value in them, so I'm really excited to get to share them with you guys and have you learn too. So thank you so much for joining us, Dana.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Goodbye.